In the summer of 1914, Woodrow Wilson faced two great crises. Just as the guns of August signaled the start of World War I in Europe, the president's wife, Ellen, died of a kidney ailment.
Ellen Wilson died, and Wilson was heard to whisper, "My God, what am I going to do?"
As he privately mourned his wife, Wilson was faced with an increasingly difficult public dilemma. Most Americans wanted nothing to do with the Great War in Europe, so Wilson pledged neutrality. But that was problematic, especially with German submarines targeting British passenger ships that often carried American civilians across the Atlantic. In one incident, the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, 128 Americans were killed.
Despite public outrage over the Lusitania, most Americans wanted Wilson to keep his head, which he did, and save him from Europe's awful mess. They simply did not think that this was America's fight.
In 1915, 17 months after his wife died, Wilson remarried. His bride was a Washington widow named Edith Bowling Galt. The following year, he was narrowly re-elected as president, making him the first Democratic incumbent to win re-election since Andrew Jackson in 1832. With Germany declaring early in 1917 that American shipping would no longer be spared the wrath of submarine warfare, it would be a challenging second term for the domestic-minded president.
Wilson remarked to a friend, "It would be an irony of fate if my administration were consumed by foreign affairs." Well, it was, of course, a tragic irony of fate, but of course that is exactly what happens by the second administration.
On April 2, 1917, Wilson asked Congress for a declaration of war against Germany. In this famous war message, he minted what would become an enduring theme in American foreign policy: the world must be made safe for democracy.
"I shall bring peace and safety to all nations and make the world itself at last free." That's how he ended the speech. It was really one of the great speeches in American history.
From the beginning of America's involvement in the war, Wilson was focused on his vision for the peace. And central to that vision was his idea for the League of Nations, an international body that could settle disputes without bloodshed and bring an end to war. The League would become his great obsession. As a war president, Wilson mostly kept his hands off and let U.S. Army General John Blackjack Pershing take care of the details.
John J. Pershing said that Woodrow Wilson gave him only one order: maintain a separate American army. Wilson had brought the United States into the war late and for our own reasons. And one of the ways to make sure that we emphasized how separate our commitment to the war was to keep a separate army.
The first family aided the war effort by grazing sheep on the White House lawn and auctioning off the wool to raise money for the Red Cross. But the man who sought to make the world safe for democracy turned a blind eye to democratic suppression at home when Congress passed the Sedition and Espionage Acts of 1918, which made it a crime to criticize the government.
Wilson really did not set this in motion in a direct way, but he acquiesced in the suppression of fundamental civil liberties for the duration of the war.
Overseas, the arrival of the American army proved decisive for the Allies. 19 months after Wilson declared war, Germany surrendered.